Hello, this is a video on how to play Tri-Peaks Solitaire. And so Tri-Peaks Solitaire is a somewhat different uh, solitaire game than any other version of solitaire. If you just look at the configuration right here, the cards are organized in a weird manner. It's kind of like a pyramid, but not quite. Do note that in terms of the history of the game, it was invented by a man in 1989. And he, before he even, I guess, released the game, he proved that over 90% of games are winnable. So if you're good enough, you can win over 90% of games. However, there is always a luck factor, which can make it impossible to win some games. And so the game board in Tri-Peak Solitaire is made up of 3 peaks. And so do keep in mind you need a standard 52 card deck. And so the game board in Tri-Peak Solitaire, what you'll want to do is you'll want to make 3 peaks, 4 cards high, right? And so 1, 2, 3, 4 cards high. The peaks share the lowest level. And so you can note that the lowest level between all the peaks is shared. The cards at the bottom are face up and the higher ones are face down. And so you'll set up a peak, and each peak has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards face down. And so you'll set up 6 cards face down in a 3, 2, 1 configuration. And then you'll set up 10 cards face up, sharing the bottom row of the peaks. The stock is the face down pile right here. It's the remainder of your cards. You draw cards from the stock and you put them on the waist. The waist is the face up pile next to the stock. In this case, it would be empty at the beginning because we have not put any cards in there yet. And so the gameplay. The gameplay is simple. The objective of the game is to move all the cards from the 3 peaks onto the waist pile. You can only move open cards to the waist. A card is considered open if there are no other cards covering it. And so at the beginning, we only have these open cards, the 10 cards in the bottom row. Once you move cards from the peaks, you open up other cards that you can flip over and are then open to move to the waist as well. And so you cannot flip over any card until it is, if it is being covered by another card. And so you can only flip over a card when it is completely open. And so you can move a card onto the waist if it ranks 1 higher or 1 lower than the topmost card on the waist. And so if there is a 6 on the waist, you can move a card that is 1 higher or 1 lower. So you can move a 5 or a 7 there. Initially the waist is empty and you can move any card there. I'm going to move a 5. I'm going to move a 4. That way I can move no, actually I'll undo that. I'm going to move a 3. Then I'll move 4, then I'll move 5. Actually, I'll undo that as well. My apologies, my apologies. I'm not that good at this game. I should be good at card games since I've played a bunch of them, but unfortunately I'm still quite bad. And so what we'll do is we'll move this 2 here, then we can move a card that is ranked 1 higher or 1 lower. We'll go with a 3, then we'll go with a 4, 1 higher or 1 lower. What's 1 higher or 1 lower than 4? That's either 3 or 5. We'll move a 5. What's 1 higher or 1 lower than 5? That's a 4 or a 6. We'll go with a 6. What's 1 higher or 1 lower than a 7? That is what's 1 higher or 1 lower than a 6? Well, 1 lower would be a 5. 1 higher would be a 7. Then we can also place an 8. And likewise, notice how we started uncovering cards here. You can uncover cards, right? The cards uncover when you remove all the overlapping cards. And so what's the objective? The objective is to make 3 peaks, right? That's why it's called Tri-Peak Solitaire. Make 3 peaks of 6 cards each, and then put 10 cards on the bottom row that are face up. You put the rest of the cards in a stockpile, and then you start the waste pile. If the waste pile has no card on it, right? In this case, that would be the first card you place on the waste pile. You can place any card. And so that's what we did. And so you move a card that is 1 higher or 1 lower than the topmost card on the waist. You're also allowed to turn the corner. Turning the corner meaning making a full circle. In any card game, just you remember this for future reference. Turning the corner means completing the circle of cards. And so you can go king, ace, 2, ace, king. Right? You can put an ace on a 2 or a king. That's turning the corner. the ace completes the cycle. The ace is one lower than the 2, but it's also considered one higher than the king. It's sort of it completes the cycle. It's called turning the corner. And so remember, you make your 3 peaks, and the objective is to get cards in the waste pile. The first card is your choice. The rest must be ranked 1 higher or 1 lower. The objective is to get all the cards from the peak into the waste pile. And so far it sounds pretty simple. That's because it is pretty simple. But let's talk about some other things. If you have no cards in the peaks, that can be moved to the waste. Then you get a card from the stock and turn it over to the waste. And so in this case, are there any cards that can be moved from the waste? From the tri-peaks that are face up and can be moved into the waste? Well, a card that would be ranked 1 higher or 1 lower than this 9 would be 1 lower would be a 8, 1 higher would be a 10. There's no 8 or 10 anywhere that is face up, and so there are no moves left from the peaks. And so if you have no cards in the peaks that can be moved to the waste, then you get a card from the stock and you turn it over to the waste, like so. Do note, so that's unlike other solitaire games, you cannot reflip and go through the stock again. You can only go through the stockpile once. Only once. And so don't use the stockpile unless you are sure you cannot move any cards from the peaks. You win the game by moving all cards from all 3 peaks to the waste. The cards left in the stock when you finish do not matter. And so you're only concerned about getting all the cards from the peaks into the waste pile. And so it's pretty simple, and it sounds pretty simple, and it is pretty simple. Once again, let's sum it up. Make your 3 peaks. You move face-up cards to a waste pile if they're ranked 1 higher or 1 lower. If there are no moves made available to make, you flip a card from the stockpile onto the waste pile. The game you can only go through the stockpile once, and so the game ends when you win by moving all the cards from the peaks into the waste pile. Do not be concerned about the stockpile, or you lose the game when you can't move any cards from the peaks and you have no more cards left in the stockpile. And so that sort of wraps up how to play. And so let's just keep playing here. Also, some players like to keep track of their moves, right? Because they like to finish the game in as few moves as they can. And if that's something you find fun, then feel free to do so. Once again, all you need for this is a standard 52 card deck, and that's the beauty of it. And so what's ranked 1 lower or 1 higher than a 6? 1 lower would be a 5, 1 higher would be a 7. None of that is present, and so we will flip over. 1 lower would be a jack, 1 higher would be a king is present. So that's what we do. A queen is 1 lower. And what's 1 lower than a queen? A jack. What's 1 higher than a queen? A king. None of that is present, and so we flip. What's 1 higher than a king? An ace. What's 1 lower than a king? A queen. None of that is present. We flip. Now there's an ace. What's 1 higher? A 2. Then a 3 is 1 higher. Then a 4. Then a 5. Then a 6. Well, can we do anything else? Well, 1 higher would be a 7. 1 lower would be a 5. None of that is present, and so we flip over a card from the stockpile. An ace. 1 higher would be a 2. 1 lower would be a king. We have 1 lower here. We have a king. 1 higher would be an ace, 1 lower would be a queen. None of that is present here, and so we would then flip over another card. 1 higher would be an ace, 1 lower would be a queen. None of that is present, so we flip over another card. 1 higher would be a 3, 1 lower would be an ace. We have a 3, and so we'll place that. 1 higher would be a 4, 1 lower would be a 2. None of that is present, face up, and so we flip over a card. 1 higher would be a king, 1 lower would be a jack. None of that is present, so we flip over a card. 1 higher would be an 8, 1 lower would be a 6. A 6 is present, and so we'll play that. 1 higher would be a 7, 1 lower would be a 5. None of that is present, and so we will flip over a card. 1 higher would be a 2, 1 lower would be a king. None of that is present, so we flip over a card. Do note that we cannot just get rid of cards by overlapping. It must be 1 higher or 1 lower. 1 higher would be a 10, 1 lower would be an 8. We have a 10, and so we'll play that. 1 higher would be a 5, 1 lower would be a 3. None of those are present. We flip over a card. 1 higher would be an 8, 1 lower would be a 6. None of those are present. We flip over a card. 1 higher would be a queen, 1 lower would be a 10. None of those are present. We flip over a card. 1 higher would be a 3, 1 lower would be an ace. An ace is 1 lower, so we put that there. 1 higher would be a 2, 1 lower would be a king. None of that is present, so we flip the card. One higher would be a queen, one lower would be a 10. None of that is present, so we flip the card. One higher would be a jack, one lower would be a 9. The 9 is one lower, so we flip the card. One higher would be a 10, one lower would be an 8. One lower, an 8 is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 9, one lower would be a 7. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a queen, one lower would be a 10. The queen is present, one higher, we flip the card. One higher would be a king, one lower would be a jack. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be an 8, one lower would be a 6. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 6, one lower would be a 4. A 4 is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 4, one lower would be a 2. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 6, one lower would be a 4. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 9, one lower would be a 7. The 9 is present, that's what we have. One higher would be a 10, one lower would be an 8. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a 9, one lower would be a 7. None of that is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a jack, one lower would be a 9. The jack is present, we flip the card. One higher would be a queen, one lower would be a 10. We play the 10 and we win the game. Do note that we had no more cards left in the stockpile. And so we were quite close there. If there were no valid moves, let's say there was the last card was a 10 and the card on top here was an 8, then we wouldn't be able to move that last card out of the tri-peak, and so we would lose the game. And so I think you sort of understand how to play the game, right? Set up your peaks, and then do what you set up your peaks. 6 cards in each peak, 10 cards on the bottom, the remaining in the stock. You place cards in the waste pile if they are ranked one higher, one lower. The objective is to get rid of all the cards in the peaks. And so it was tedious. I mean, it was probably tedious for you, not for me, because I love this. I love playing these types of games, but I was announcing every single move I was doing, and I was announcing the reasoning behind it. I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to play, and hopefully you were able to see. I will announce this first here because there is an opportunity for a chain reaction of moves. So we'll play the 9, and then we'll play the 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. And so you saw. And so we actually equaled the record on this website. So I guess that's some sort of an accomplishment considering I was trying to do a demonstration there. But no, right? Like, look how fast that game was. Literally, and I apologize for being silent there, but I was focused on the game. But look how fast that game was. And so this is a very fast-paced game. We actually got the record for this website, so that's kind of exciting, right? I guess I'm not that bad at card games. But as you can see, Tri-Flip Solitaire is a very fast-paced card game. It has a lot of strategy in it, and it's quite fun. And it's quite different from any other Solitaire game, so I highly suggest you try it. Even if you don't like Solitaire and you don't like that genre, I highly suggest you try it. And so that wraps up how to play Tri-Peak Solitaire. Do note, over 90% of games are winnable if you do play smart. And so, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.